Hello. Hello. I'm live. Oh, I'm futzing around. Hi. Welcome, Frankenstein Tea. How's that? Pretty good? Is that all right? I don't know why I have to futz with this today. It's different books underneath. I have a different prop. How's everybody doing? Welcome to Frankenstein Tea. It's a fake out. I don't really have tea. It's just water, but it's my tea mug. I'm getting closer to being prepared and having tea with this tea program. Let's see. I'm Kristen. I'm the library director for the Island Free Library on Block Island. This is a daily short story program live at 3 o'clock on this YouTube channel, always available for re-listening and re-watching. All the stories we've recorded on this channel for this program are there on the playlist for Frankenstein Tea. It is short stories for adult listeners, and it's a chance for us to check in with each other, see how your day's going, maybe just do a little self-evaluation. What do you need to do to make the rest of your day the best day you can? What do you need to do? Take a nap? Turn off the TV. I don't know. Those are always my go-tos, right? What else do we do? Maybe not work. Maybe go home early. Maybe work late. Maybe get something done and off your list. Maybe reading a really good book. Who knows? Anyway, check in with yourself. Happy to have you here and checking in with us with this short story program. Maybe you've made yourself tea. I'm going to have another sip of my water. Water. I'm going to try to read a short story today by an Irish writer. Not very good at these. You've heard me say this before. I'm not very good at Irish dialect, brogue, pronunciations, names, places. Not very good at this. Never traveled to Ireland, so I don't have a very good context of it. But I'll try, and hopefully it'll be okay. This is a great little short story book. This is called That Old Country Music. Let's see. That Old Country Music by Kevin Barry. He wrote something called The Night Boat to Tangier. This is That Old Country Music Stories, Kevin Barry. It's got some really good little things in here. I like it a lot. And I thought, what am I going to read? I read a few and they were maybe a little, well, I'll read you this on the flap. Stories of rural Ireland in the classic mode, full of love and sex, melancholy and despair, and bedecked in gorgeous prose. So, I had to find one for the program, right? Not too melancholy. That's a good word, melancholy. Not sure that I think, and so some maybe I'll come back to on a day where we can be a little melancholy, or I feel like I can be melancholy. Not today. I'm going to read you, but here we go. I don't know. I didn't read to the end of this one. This one could be totally melancholy. This could really, really whoop us in the end. I don't know. We're going to see. I'm going to read it. Let's hope it doesn't. Let's hope I got to one that actually, I'm going to read the last paragraph just to see. I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. Some Irish literature today by Kevin Barry. This short story is called Who's Dead, McCarthy? You'd see him coming on O'Connell Street, the hanging jaws, the woeful trudge, the load. You'd cross the road to avoid him, but he'd have spotted you, and he would draw you into him. The wind would travel up Bedford Row from the Shannon to take the skin off us and add emphasis to the misery. The main drag was the daily parade for his morbidity. Limerick in the bone evil of its winter. And here come Con McCarthy, haunted looking in his enormous suffering overcoat. The way he sidled in with the long, pale face and the hot, emotional eyes. "Did you hear who's dead?" he whispered. Con McCarthy was our connoisseur of death. He was its most knowing expert, its deftest elaborator. There was no death too insignificant for his delectation. A 96-year-old poor dear in Thomondgate, with the lungs papery as moth's wings, and the map lines of the years cracking her lips as she whispered her feeble last in the night. Con would have word of it by breakfast, and he would be up and down the street, his sad recital perfecting as he went. "Elsie Sheedy," he'd try. "You must have known poor Elsie, with the scaw leg and the little sparrow's chin. I suppose she hadn't been out much this last while. She was a good age now, but I mean, Jesus, all the same. Elsie, gone." His eyes might turn slowly upwards here, as though in trail of the ascending Elsie. "She'd have been at the Stella Bingo often," he reminisced, with the whites of the eyes showing. "Tuesdays and Thursdays, until the leg gave out altogether and the balance went. She used to get whiteouts coming over the bridge. At one time, she took the money for the tickets below at the roller disco, inside in the little cage. Of course, that wasn't today nor yesterday." No, Con. No, I didn't know her." In truth, he might have no more than clapped eyes on the woman the odd time himself, but still he would retreat back into the folds of the overcoat, like a flower head closing when the sun goes in, and he was genuinely moved by the old lady's passing. Con McCarthy's city was disappearing all around him. He had a special relish, it seemed to me, for the slapstick death. He'd come sauntering along at noon of day, now almost jaunty with the sadness, the eyes wet and wide, and he'd lean into you, and he might even have to place a palm to your shoulder to steady himself against the terrible excitement of it all. "Can you believe it?" he said. "A stepladder." "Which was this, Con?" "Did you not hear?" "No, Con." "Did you not hear who's dead?" "Who, Con? Who?" "Charlie Small." "Ah, stop." "The way it happened," he said, shaking his head against what was almost a grin. "They hadn't painted the front room since 1987. Now, it isn't me that's saying this. It's the man's wife is saying this. It's Betty is saying this. She could remember it was 1987 on account of her uncle, Paddy, who was home for his 50th. He was a fitter in Earl's Court, since dead himself, drowned in his own fluids, apparently. Betty was a Mullaney from Weston originally. They were never toppers in the lung department. Anyhow, Charlie Smalls says, 'Listen, it's gone beyond the 30-year mark. We'll paint that flippin' front room.' Of course, Betty's delighted. 'We'll get a man in,' she says. 'No,' Charlie says, 'it's only a small room. I'll have it done before the dinner if I start the 9 in the morning news. If I start after the 9 in the morning news.' Betty strides out for a tin of paint. She comes back with a glass of a peach tone. Lovely. Calming, that'll be, she thinks, not knowing. God love her. What's coming next? The stepladder being dragged out from under the stairs. Charlie climbing up to the top step of it, and the man ate alive from the inside out by type 2 diabetes and weakish, I suppose, on account of it. And the next thing, the dog's let in when it shouldn't be let in, and that little dog is saucy now. She always has been. And she goes herring through the front room, a spaniel breed, unpredictable. And the tin of peach-colored paint is sent flying, and Charlie reaches out for it, but the ladder's not set right and wobbles, and next thing he's over and off the back of it, and the neck is broke on the man. He shook his head with a blend that spoke curiously of tragic fate and happy awe. "Dead on the floor before they got to him," he said. Jesus Christ, Con. The day nor the hour, he said, and he walked away happily into the persistent rain. He had about 40 different faces. He would arrange his face to match precisely the tang or timbre of the death described. For the death of a child, Con McCarthy's woe was fathoms deep and painfully genuine. An early death in adulthood brought a species of pinched grief about his temples, a migraine's whine its music. He avoided eye contact if it was a drowning that had occurred. He had an altogether dim view of the Shannon River as an utter death magnet. And he was all too often to be found down in poor man's Kilkee, looking out over the water, wordlessly, but his lips moving, as if in silent consultation with the souls that hovered above the river, their roar at the Curraghoer Falls. His role as our messenger of death along the length of O'Connell Street and back seemed to be of a tradition. Such a figure has perhaps always walked the long plain mile of the street and spoken the necessary words, a grim but vital player in the life of a small city. But Con McCarthy's interest in death was wide-ranging, and it vaulted the city walls, so to speak, and stretched out to the world beyond to gorge intimately upon the deaths of strangers. "Here's one for you," he said, leaning into me one day outside the George Hotel. "Man in Argentina, I believe it was, cattle farmer, impaled on his own bull. And didn't the bull go mental after it and charged in circles around the field, 90 miles an hour, and the poor farmer still attached to the horns with the life bled out of him. An hour and a half before a neighbor was got over with a shotgun, that long before they shot the bull and got the misfortunate corpse off the horns. Can you imagine it? The man's wife and children were watching, apparently, roaring out of them. They'll never be right." Another day, creeping up behind me with a light touch to my elbow, and then the lean in, the soft whisper, and here was the news of the famous dead. "Zsa Zsa Gabor," he said, "gone. Though I suppose it was nearly a release to the poor woman for a finish. Did you know she'd been 5 years on life support?" "That I did not know, Con." 5 years. Heart attack at the end of it. Sure, the poor heart would be weak as a little bird's in the woman's chest at that stage. I believe it was 99 years of age she was. They're after planting her in a gold box outside in California. No woman deserves it more. A former Miss Hungry. Had he been exposed to death early? I wondered. Was it then some psychic wound had been opened at first glance into the void? Whatever the case, I believed that his condition was worsening. He began to move out from actual occurrences of death to consider in advance the shapes it might yet assume. Walking down the street now, he was reading death into situations. He was seeing it everywhere. He had the realization we all have, but that most of us are wise enough to keep submerged. The knowledge that death always is close by. He'd stop to consider a building site. He'd look up. The long, creased face would fold into a hopeless smile, and as you passed by, he'd lean in, the head slowly shaking. "Are you not watching?" he said. "Which, Con? See that scaffold above there? Are you not watching the wind on it? If that wind gets up at all, the whole lot could come down. A pole could go swinging. Open your head and you walking down the road as quick as it look at you, and that would be an end to it." He walked the circuit of the 3 bridges every night. If you idled anywhere by the river of an evening, you might take the slow rake of Con McCarthy's worried eye. He would try to have a good read of you. I met him one night on the far side of the river. He was on a bench, the water moving slowly past, the traffic scant, but passing its few lights across the falling dark. Maybe it was the September of the year. that sense of turn and grim resolve about the days, the evenings. Did you not hear, he said? Which was this, Con? Did you not hear who's dead? Who, Con, who? But this time he just grinned as if he was playing with me, and he let the weak tea smile play out loosely across the river a few moments. Sure, look, he said. We're all on the way out. I know, Con. I know. Isn't that the truth of it? For a finish. Can I talk to you seriously, Con? Huh? Can I ask you something? What? Why are you so drawn to it, to death? Why are you always the first with the bad news? Do you not realize, Con, that people cross the road when they see you coming? You put the hearts sideways in us. Oh, Jesus Christ, here he comes, we think. Here comes who's dead McCarthy. Who has he put in the ground for us today? I can't help it, he said. I find it very impressive. Impressive? That there's no gainsaying it, that no one has the answer to it, that all we have to face into the room with it at the end of the day, and there's not one of us can make the report after. I became morbidly fascinated by Con McCarthy. I asked around the town about him. I came to understand that he was in many ways a mysterious figure. Some said he came from Hyde Road, others from Ballinanty. The city was just about big enough to afford a measure of anonymity. You could be a great familiar of O'Connell Street, but relatively unknown beyond the normal hours of the day and night. We might know broadly of your standing, your people and their afflictions, but the view would be fuzzy, the detail blurred. So it was with Con. He did not seem to hold down a job. It was hard to imagine the workmates who could suffer him. His occupation, plainly, was with the dead. It was difficult to age him. He was a man out of time somehow. The overcoat was vast and worn at all seasons and made him a figure from a Jack B. Yeats painting or an old Russian novel. There was something antique in his bearing. The rain that he drew down upon himself seemed to be an old, old rain. One night on William Street, I spotted him sitting late and alone in the Burgerland, there over a paper cup of tea. That cup of tea was the saddest thing I ever saw. I sat in a few tables from him and watched carefully. As he sat alone, his lips again moved, and I have no doubt that it was a litany of names he was reciting, the names of the dead, but just barely, just a whisper enough to hoist those names that they might float above the lamps of the city. And maybe he was truly the sanest of us. I sometimes thought on those nights in October when I could not sleep, and I took to driving late around the streets and the bridges and the town, and I knew that it was passing from me, and how remarkable it was that we can turn our minds from that which is inevitable. Con McCarthy could not turn from it. As cars came towards me at pace on the dual carriageway, sometimes for just the splinter of a moment there in the small hours, I wanted to swerve and jolt into their lights and bring the taste of it onto me, the taste of its metal on my lips. Bring forward the news, even if I could make no subsequent report of it. When Con McCarthy died, it was, of course, to a spectacular absence of fanfare, suddenly, unexpectedly, and rating no more than a brief line in the Chronicle, deaths of a Tuesday in November. Almost laughing, almost glad, I went along O'Connell Street in the rain with it. I leant in, I whispered, and softly, like funeral doves, I let my suffering eyes ascend. Did you hear at all? I said. Did you not hear who's dead? That Old Country Music by Kevin Barry. Stories. Printed by Doubleday out of New York in 2020. New book. That short story was called Who's Dead, McCarthy? There's some good books. There's some good short stories in this book. We'll see if we come back to it again. Okay, sun is out. Let's see. I don't know what it is. Wednesday afternoon. Is that right? Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. 4/21, 2021. I think that means it's Wednesday. Yeah, I think it's Wednesday. I don't know. Working away. Getting ready. Block Island is changing. Here we go. Everybody get ready. Wear your mask. Get your shots. Wash your hands. Eat right, sleep right. Check back in tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'll be here with a story. Peace out.